All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, today we're going to be continuing of course, the topic that we started last time. And we were talking about, still, of course, the topic is related to funeral and the different things that relate to funerals. So we talked about what to say to the person that is ill, whether we're speaking about a person that has a long prognosis or whether a short prognosis. At the end, it is the sunnah to say لا بأس عليك طهور إن شاء الله. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this illness be a sin remover. Now, it is a sunnah that a person would make a will. We talked about the will and the details about will, and we also talked about saying La ilaha illallah next to the person that is dying. And we also talked about reading Surah Yasin to the person that is dying. And we talked about some things in relationship to death and what the sunnah is to do in that regards. Okay. So, of course, it is part of the sunnah. Let's just start it right here. Part of the sunnah, when a person dies, that we would basically cover the body with anything, basically to just give this respect and this honor to the person that is dying. Okay, because the Prophet ﷺ حين توفي سجي ببرد حبرة. Okay, that the Prophet ﷺ himself, when he had died, that the Prophet ﷺ had actually been covered with a cloak. Why? It's basically you don't want that person that is dead to appear in those moments where certainly this person is mute, this person is lifeless, this person is definitely to be respected in their most honorable image. And the most honorable image is when they were capable of speaking, when they were capable of basically interacting with you. And that's the most honorable image that you would want to preserve for that person. And certainly it is also the sunnah to not let this person, this deceased person, be amongst the people. You know, I know in Indonesia, there are certain villages that they would keep the dead person for years. They would have a special house for them, and they would think that it's giving honor to the deceased, but the honor to the deceased actually happens when the person is deceased, that they would be buried. The Prophet ﷺ said, لا ينبغي لجيفة مسلم أن تحبس بين ظهراني أهله. The Prophet ﷺ said, it is not desirable, it is not befit for the deceased corpse of a Muslim that it would be kept between his family, and therefore we would basically have to give it honor by burying it as soon as possible. And Imam Ahmad said, Karamatul mayyiti ta'jiluhu. It is part of honoring the dead to hurry and certainly bury the dead person or bury their body as soon as possible. And the reason for that is to certainly preserve the body from decaying, from starting to decompose in front of everyone, and certainly just to make sure that whether we're speaking about the odor or whether we're speaking about the different probably different mites or the different worms, all of those, they start basically coming out of the body. You want to give this person the most memorable appearance, the most memorable smell, the most memorable moment to basically be left in what we would recall about this person. So giving them that honor, just like when you give yourself honor before you appear in front of people. You would comb your hair, probably put perfume, and probably dress in your best garments or outfits, etc. That's the same way. You want to appear a person of dignity, a person of good appearance. That's the same thing that you would want to do to this dead person. Now, can we wait? Is it permissible to wait until this person's family members probably would come, maybe from other cities, maybe to just say the farewell, maybe goodbyes or whatever before this person is buried? It is permissible unless we fear that this person is starting to decompose. Then in that situation, we don't want to delay this further. We want to make sure that that the body is not starting to decompose, and therefore it really depends on the climate. It depends on a number of different factors. But the part about making sure that we are hurrying and basically making sure that this person is buried as soon as possible is basically our first priority, and not necessarily somebody else probably driving an 8-hour drive or whatever it is. And yeah, they wanted to share a special goodbye moment or etc. But we're going to be looking at the different signs, and the different signs you would see. One, the most important, I would say, sign that yes, you have to do it within hours or even sooner than that, is when the body starts getting basically blown up. That's when we definitely don't want to get that far. So the body starts, certainly we know different gases basically start accumulating in the body. Then you would see the body starting to puff up. Once the body is starting to puff up, that's when we're starting to say, sorry, but we cannot delay this further or any longer. Those are usually puffing up, usually in the abdomen area. That's when we would start hearing, let's say you're tapping it, you could see, yep, there are gases starting to accumulate. And that's when definitely, sorry, but this is too late. We need to definitely rush in, not only washing and shrouding, but we need to make sure that we rush the burial as well, because once it gets that far, it basically gets dangerous on the people present. We definitely don't want it to get that far. Okay. But usually the signs of decay were, yes, we would, within the first few minutes, you would see that the body lost its temperature. The body starts hardening, usually the joint areas, the legs start hardening. That's when you would know that, okay, it's starting to go into the process of basically starting to decompose, lose temperature, lose basically all those fluids. They basically start becoming harder and harder. And certainly then it goes into the process. After the harder it gets, then that means the older it had been dead, basically. And then certainly you could see dryness. The dryness right there around the face, around the jaw, around the joints, though, that area being drier and drier. And certainly that will give you an idea of how long this had been. So you don't want to further make it wait any longer. And certainly you could see then the darkness around the eyes would give you that it's starting to right now get into the process of not only becoming like a skeleton, but right now it's starting to get into the decaying process even faster. That's why they would actually they would put it in a cold place, because the colder the place, of course, it would slow down the decaying process. So that's why they would put them in like a fridge or something, freezer, etc., to slow down the decaying process. Because how does it slow down the decaying process? It slows down the decaying process because the different mites, the different basically creatures that are responsible for decaying and decomposing the body, when it's too cold, it becomes not the right atmosphere for them to come in. But when it's hotter climate, that's when it becomes the right climate for them to come in, and that's when it basically decays and decomposes faster. That's why we would put the food, for example, in the refrigerator. It decomposes, it decays slower when it's put in the refrigerator, because the different creatures or the different things that are there in nature, they basically would not find a cold climate as something that is right for them. So that's why, we would put our food in the refrigerator, etc. I know we're not food, but we're still of natural composition. So that's the same thing. The natural composition decomposes faster in hot climates than in cold climates. Okay, so at the end, we're natural composition. Okay, can we tell and basically announce the death of a certain person? Absolutely. In order to probably bring in the people to join for the funeral prayer, or probably join for supporting the person and that the person's family, or even making the dua for that person. But certainly not to make the announcement in order to somehow count all the good things that they had presented and all of that. That's basically a jahili behavior. So we're not there, to each one giving out those condolences and rating all those good things that this person had done, and this person in what they will be remembered for, and all of that. That's not a Muslim way of doing it. The Muslim way of doing it is making istighfar for that person, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive them, reminding the people that lost, the nearest people that lost their loved one, to make dua for them, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support them if they were to be patient, etc. So it's basically encouraging them to be patient, or supporting them to basically get back to their life as soon as possible. And certainly sometimes, of course, with anxiety, they're probably not capable of maybe cleaning their house, going to their job, or probably, preparing food or taking care of the children. All of these things can be, as a result of anxiety, can be something that is hard for them to move on. So you come in to basically give them the support to get back to their life as soon as possible. And that differs from one person to another. The other thing is that it is basically the sunnah there are actually, I would have actually done it this way. I would have written that one. The first thing that we would do is, number one, we need to we're talking about the money. How should we deal with the money? Well, first, we're going to be using that money for shrouding, washing, and for burial. That's the first thing that we're going to be doing. So if, let's say, they created a GoFundMe page, for example, okay, then in that situation, the first thing that we're going to be using that money for is for the burial, the washing, and the shrouding, and all of that. And it does actually cost, by the way, it's not for free. We would usually think that, hey, people are doing it for free, but to sanitize the place, to wash and shroud, to get the material that is licensed to basically do the job, to make sure that these areas don't become a place of diseases for and certainly a contamination for the people that are living. They have to do special types of sanitizing for that place and so forth. And the same thing, even when we're speaking about the people that are doing the job, the washing and shrouding, it's a job. It's a job, and we have to honor those that do this job. And even though I'll tell you, we usually don't recognize those people until someone dear to us dies, and that's when we start recognizing these people. But usually these people are not recognized because usually they're not out in the public. They're not out in the public. They're usually doing their job, and people are usually, I guess, feeling saddened by one particular thing happening, which is the death of this loved one, that at that moment, they don't even recognize all the other details. All the other details, it becomes forgotten. One thing becomes remembered is that our loved one just passed away. But the person that washed and shrouded and did all the job for you is usually not what we would question and not what we would recognize. And at that moment, especially, these people, we would usually think that they have to do it as a volunteer, but that's not the case. These people are doing this job that many don't dare to do. Many are afraid to do. And we would usually think that these people, you just got to do it as a volunteer and not recognize that these people are being there, they're present, they're doing this job that no one dares to do. And therefore, we have to honor the effort, the work, the fear, let me say the hard work that can actually be something that is dangerous even on their life, because it adds on to that anxiety. Imagine just every day you're just dealing with the dead. Every single day you're just dealing with the dead. Certainly in the beginning, a mortician, in the beginning, it might be something that is scary, that doesn't feel good, that, it just makes you get into a mood of anxiety. But then later on, you start becoming numb and you don't fear anymore the dead. It just becomes so pragmatic that you become so numb to it. It's good and it's bad, but we need people to do the job. And I think it's important that, that training is done based on Sunnah, and that we recognize the efforts. Okay. The second thing that we do with the money, other than the washing and shrouding and the burial, is basically paying the debt before we even do anything else. When we talk about debt, we first have to make sure that this person really owes that person, or that the deceased person basically really did owe X or Y and Z, and not just because someone comes up and says, hey, this person owed me this much. We're not going to just accept it just like that. We need witnesses, we need evidence, we need basically the supporting details to make sure that this is actually true and not just a claim that someone is making. After death, we have to look into will, and we talked about will and what we need to do with will before we even start looking into their money and doing all that inheritance and the distribution. of inheritance, we first have to, before we even distribute anything, we have to consider doing these first. Many people jump into distributing the inheritance before even doing all of this. Now, there are some good websites, by the way, good websites that right now you can actually put the information, but you have to have some knowledge about inheritance and al-fara'id and ahkam al-mawarith and inheritance and all of that. And then and you put in the amount, and it would basically do the calculation for you by the penny and tell you how much each one basically inherits by the penny and all of those details. So it's something that you could actually do, but certainly depending on the country, certain countries, they basically require that you would go to the Sharia court, and that the court would basically notarize that distribution and say, well, this is what you get, and this is how they would look into the different documents to make sure that this is the money registered, this is the amount that is distributed, and so forth. So it doesn't mean that we could just do our own distribution, we're all set, but we would have to go through a certain process in certain countries. Okay. Certainly in order to go through the process, like we said, we have to first shroud, pay the debt, then basically distribute the will for those that are not inheriting, okay, and then do the distribution of inheritance, okay. When we speak about paying debt, whether we're speaking about zakah, because if the person did not pay their zakah, then we're going to be deducting the amount of zakah that this person owes. Okay, we're going to be basically paying the zakah. If this person had made a will to do Hajj, but then they couldn't do Hajj, then before we would even distribute any inheritance, we're going to say, did this person make a will to do Hajj? If yes, then we're going to look at the Hajj packages, and we're going to say we're going to deduct this much of money to pay someone to do Hajj on their behalf, okay? And the other part is oath. We're going to look into, did they make any oath that we would basically have to fulfill? What does an oath look like? An oath is not a yameen, but even if we're speaking about an oath being a yameen, saying, Wallahi, I will do this and this, okay? Or Wallahi, and of course, the different kinds of yameen, I'm not going to get into that. But a nadhr is a different oath. It can come in different forms, okay? We're talking about somebody, let's say, saying, by Allah, if I graduate high school, I will pay, I don't know, $2,000 to the people in Africa, okay, or in the Horn of Africa, or whatever it is. Then that would be another. It doesn't have to be as something as I had said, if this happens, I will pay this much. Okay, that's a specific type of nadhr, but there are different kinds of nadhr or different kinds of oath, okay? Al-kafara, if there is an expiation a person is supposed to be paying, an expiation, whether due to zihar or whether it was due to perhaps maybe killing somebody, or whether they were supposed to do a kafara for not fasting, or probably just different expiations that the person was supposed to do, then in that situation, we will be using their money before we even pass out any distribution, or even making the money to be paid as what they had willed. We have to consider paying the debt first. What debt are we talking about? The debt of expiation, the debt of Hajj, the debt of zakah. All of that is going to be our priority in paying off the different debts, whether we're speaking about a debt that he owes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as in zakah, or in Hajj, or in nadhr, or in expiation, or whether we're speaking about human debts such as returning people's trust. So let's say this person had this necklace that someone else gave it to him to take care of. Then in that situation, we're going to say, okay, well, this necklace belongs to sister X or Y, and therefore we would have to give it back to sister X or Y. And same thing if we're talking about giving something as a trust, okay, then in that situation we would have to give it back to its owners. Okay, and that's the same thing when we're speaking about writing a will. Writing a will is not only in what money you might give to others, but we're speaking about what money you probably have reserved for others. And money doesn't have to be the money that is in cash. Some money could also be probably property, probably gold, maybe even a share or something like that. Then in that situation, you owe this to X and Y. Write it down and make it clear. Or maybe always, let's say, let your spouse know that there is a share that I owe to X or Y, and this is the amount that I owe to that person, and this is a joint property or whatever it is, and let your spouse know, not only in written format or maybe a notarized format, but you would also inform your spouse, for example, that, hey, this is what I owe. Or it doesn't have to be a spouse. Maybe you need to inform your brother or your sister or your family and let them know, listen, that property does not only belong to me, but this is a joint property with my wife or with my brother or whatever it is. And therefore, we would make it clear that we are making that will to let others know that this is not my money, and therefore don't confuse what I own with what others own. Okay, so this is part of dain. This is part of debt, and this is part of how we would make sure that justice is also basically given to its owners, and basically given to the people that really have the right over this money. Okay, if a person had will to pay a certain debt, okay, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they didn't have the money. Can we do something like a GoFundMe, or probably just a friend deciding that, you know what, I want to pay on behalf of my friend this and that money. But here's one thing. It's important to say, if let's say friend X on that day said, you know what, I loved, let's, make a hypothetical name right there, Iman, okay? I loved Iman, she was a dear friend to me. And then let's say Zahira says, hey, listen, Iman owed me $5,000 and she never paid those $5,000 to me. But then let's say, I don't know, Umayya comes in and she says, you know what? Iman was so dear to me. I know very well, if she had that money, she would have paid that money to you, but she didn't have that money. So, Zahira, I will pay over that money, and on her behalf, the money, I will pay it to you. $5,000, I'm the one that's going to pay you for those $5,000. Let's just say Umayya said that. Then in that situation, is keeping that one in mind, it would be now Umayya's responsibility, since she said she will take over that portion and actually pay it on Iman's behalf. Then Umayya, it is part of her integrity to stick to the word that she had actually promised to pay on behalf of Iman. That's part of integrity. That's part of what you had put upon yourself. Then in that situation, You cannot go back and say, I was really emotional at the time, and that's why I said it, but I didn't really mean it. Sorry. I was just emotional at the time and I just said it. And right now, I'm sorry, I'm not going to stick to that word. That is losing integrity. That is losing amana. You promised a word, you stick to it. You stick to the word that you had said. To go back on it is كالكلب يعود في قيئه. The Prophet laid out a metaphor and something like more of a simile, actually. And he said a person that goes back on the hiba, on the gift that they had given, is كالكلب يعود في قيئه, is like a dog who would vomit and then lick their vomit back again. As disgusting as it sounds, the Prophet ﷺ is letting us know that to go back on a gift that you had given is very similar to a dog that might lick back their vomit. Okay, let's get back to the topic here, washing now the dead. How does that washing actually happen? So when we're speaking about washing the dead, it's important to say that it is fard kifaya. Let me write that word down. What does fard kifaya actually mean? Fard kifaya, let's write that down. It means it's a communal obligation, but the communal obligation becomes an individual obligation if we don't have anybody doing the job, or let's say we don't have enough people that is necessary to do the job, basically present to do the job. So that's the communal obligation. So if we have someone to do the job, and one thing I would say in the funeral homes in the West, I mean, I've entered many funeral homes in America, for example. I would say they're a lot better equipped than the funeral homes or the janazah area that you would have in the Muslim area. And the way that they're equipped is completely different. The funeral homes, they're actually equipped with the right sinks, and only one person is needed to do the job. They would have the machinery to carry, to lift, to do all the job. And definitely it's a lot easier because it's very well equipped. And but in Muslim funeral homes, you would really need more than one person to do the job, to carry and etc. But in funeral homes, they would have these equipments that are prepared just for basically the job, and it's machineries that would carry the deceased. It's machineries that would turn and flip and do all these different things, and it becomes it's all set up. Everything is available, from the gauze, from the needles that might be needed, from the right clothes to make you safe and protected, the right huge gloves also protected, etc. The Muslim funeral homes usually have very simple things. If you're talking about funeral homes, probably in Muslim countries, they don't usually have I would say maybe the hose and probably the bedding, right, and all of that. It's usually very simple. But in Muslim funeral homes, or at least I would say more of a room really that is designed for washing and shrouding the dead, usually annexed to the masjid. And it's usually an area that's annexed to the masjid to wash and shroud. It would usually have like a little pipe and a sewer and probably a sink. Well, there would be a sink and a hose to basically wash and shroud the dead. There would be all these coffins basically, folded and set up right there. There's also السدر and الكافور. Let me explain the sidr for a bit, okay? So this is what a sidr would look like. This is the plant, okay? This is the plant right there, actually. Okay. And then they would dry it up. It would be dried. And then after crushing it, it would look like this. I know it kind of looks like henna, right? But in order to get the foam out, you would use this in a bucket of water and you kind of shake it around. Okay. So I would say, let's say, a scoop this much, you could put it in a bucket of water. In fact, even less, just a scoop this much, for example, in a bucket of water, and kind of shake it around just with your hand, kind of shake it around and kind of mix it. And that's what makes that foam. And that's what you're going to use in order to use as a soap. So consider this as natural soap. And, I'm not a homeopath, but they would also use that for those that have hair loss. They would use that for hair loss, and for those that had skin problems, they would also use this as an herb to basically help with certain skin conditions, hair conditions as well, but as well as, of course, washing the dead with it. So they would use this as the soap, as a natural soap. What if I didn't have this? What if I didn't have this sidr and this product, I didn't have it? Can I just use soap? The answer is certainly you can just use your normal, shower soap. You could use that. That's absolutely fine. The whole object is really to wash with water. Using this is sunnah, not obligatory. Okay, it's why use this? Because this is a substance that is an insect repellent. Well, it basically cleanses. It also hardens the body. So I don't know what it does to the pores, at least scientifically. But once you put it there, you wash the body. Okay, I'm just going to make it simple first, and then we'll go in certain details. You wash the body. Okay, the whole object is to cleanse the body. So if I were to first simplify washing and shrouding, we'll just put it into 3 different steps. And that's basically washing and shrouding. Washing the body, you're just going to wash the body. Okay. And then you're going to basically shroud it in the white cloth, 3 for men and 5 for women. That's the whole object. But all the different details that we will be talking about, that's to simplify it for you, so you won't end up basically going through a harder process. So if you don't have this material, that's a sunnah. Okay, that's not obligatory. If you just wash the body, okay, and you let it dry, and then you shrouded the body with some cloth that is not tight on the body, so you shrouded the body, basically, that's enough. You just did the job. Okay, nothing complex about it. But if you wanted further details on what's the most recommended way of doing things, that's what we would basically talk about here, just to make the process easier for you and to make sure that you're taking the steps as a gradual way in order to help you do the things in the order to not get you into a messy situation. That's it. Okay. But this doesn't mean that you have to do it in this order. All the different orders that I would be talking about, making wudu is a sunnah. Sunnah, making wudu in the beginning and then making wudu at the end, that's a sunnah. As long as you wash the body, you let it dry a little bit in order to not get that shroud basically wet and all of that, then you had done everything. Okay. So like I said, doing the wudu before and the wudu after, and using the sidr, and probably putting al-hanut and all of that, and probably adding onto it the kafur and That's all sunnah. Okay. So I don't want you to confuse yourself. So let's get into this sunnah and get into that process. Okay. We're going to watch a movie later on. Okay. I'm just first giving you the terminologies that we'll be using. Okay. So this is a sidr. That's our natural soap. And we could use normal soap. Okay. Or let's call it synthetic soap. And this is al-kafur. Okay. What is al-kafur? El-kafur is actually a tree. It's a camphor tree. Let's see what it looks like. This is basically what it looks like. Okay. And what they do is they would basically they would cook it and cook it and cook it. And while it's getting cooked, they would put a cover while it's getting cooked, but the steam that comes out of while you're cooking the camphor tree, this one, the steam that comes out of it, if you have a lid, this camphor, the steam of it, it basically starts getting stuck on the lid, and then they start scraping it off, and that's what you would get. They scrape off basically after boiling this, or probably frying it. They keep boiling it, and then the steam and all that oil of it basically starts getting stuck on the lid, and then they start combining whatever that was stuck on the lid, and this is what they get. Okay. Now, this camphor itself is actually very strong and powerful. You know, I can give you an idea of what it smells like. It smells like mothballs. You know, the mothballs that you put in your sinks and all of that. Those mothballs, those are actually made from petroleum, but they smell very similar to this, or to this tree, basically. Okay. They smell very similar to it. I absolutely do not like the smell of it, but some people do. I absolutely hate it and cannot stand the smell whatsoever. And that's one main reason why I don't like washing and shrouding the dead, because the smell of camphor is too strong for me. Well, why do we use camphor anyways? Because it's an insect repellent. So we want to give dignity to this dying person. How do we use camphor when this person is washed and shrouded? Well, before they're even shrouded, after being washed with this substance, okay, after we make this soapy water, you're going to see it right now, okay, then we're going to be using this in water, and we're going to be putting it in a bucket of water, going to be mixing it really well. Okay, well, first we're going to crush it. Okay, then we're going to get something like a powder, going to put it in this water, and then we're going to basically just pour it over the dead person as more of a distribution for this insect repellent on that person. And we're going to let them dry, and then we're going to shroud them. Okay, let's see what we're going to do in the process. So number one is that the process element. Where did we get all those different tips on washing and shrouding the dead from? We got it from the hadith. Okay, we got it from the hadith. The Prophet had basically said, "Igsiluhu bima'in wa sidr." The Prophet had basically said, wash him with water and sidr. Sidr is basically this. What is sidr in English, right? Is the question. Sidr in English is, let's see what it is in English, right? This is, let's see, I'm going to give me English one. Here we go. This is it. Sisyphus spina Christi. Whatever. I hope I read the name right. This is Christ's thorn. Okay. So this is what they put on Christ? Okay. Or at least according to the Christian legend. Okay. Okay. So this is all right. They called it Christ's thorn. Okay. This is okay. اغسلوه بماء وسدر. Okay, the Prophet had said. And you could see this hadith is muttafaqun alayh, meaning that it was agreed upon between scholars. Okay, let's see. It's funny that they actually just put the word sidr and didn't actually translate it. So this is, now you know the translation. Okay. All right, let's continue. So we could see that it was mutawatir, that the Prophet ﷺ himself had basically reported, and certainly we had seen that the Prophet ﷺ himself had whether given instructions to wash and shroud, or whether in action he basically had ordered them to wash and shroud. And the Prophet ﷺ himself was actually washed and shrouded himself, even though the Prophet ﷺ himself is actually a prophet and infallible. So therefore, washing and shrouding even the others is certainly going to be a priority as well. Okay, so washing and shrouding is fard kifaya. It's a communal obligation. And the men would wash and shroud the men. And certainly it's best if we were to choose someone that is a trusted person, someone that knows the rulings of washing and shrouding, because there are certain things that they would have to do. So they have to know the fiqh of washing and shrouding. And if they don't know the
Dr. Aisha, I'm
what I
sorry
keep saying,
for pausing you there. So when you say washing, does this mean just like the normal shower, or does this mean ghusl? Because I think you might have
so
mentioned it
what we're,
before.
fair enough, what we're doing to the dead, we're really technically doing ghusl. Okay. But, you know, it became like a technical term that we would say washing, because we would think of ghusl as taking a shower, but really it's the same thing. The same idea that you would do for your own showering, you would basically do for the deceased, but the only difference is that the deceased person, you're covering their aura. So you're covering their private part from the belly button to basically the knee. Okay, so we're washing them, but we're not touching their private parts. We're going to get to that. But really the object is the same. We're washing, meaning we're bathing, meaning we're showering this person. That's it. If you shower this person, you've basically done what is needed. That's it. All the other details of, like I said, doing perhaps the wudu before and after, using sidr, using camphor, all of that is sunnah. If we just get to washing the person, that's enough. That's all that's needed. Really nothing more is considered as obligatory. The obligatory piece of it is just to wash it. That's it. Back and front, head to toe. Simple as that.
That's
Okay.
great.
That's it. Sometimes I would say the details of, flip it to the right, flip it to the left, and wash your hand, wash this. Sometimes it confuses people, and they're like, oh, I don't know which one to start with. I don't know which should I do. All of those are details. If you
SubhanAllah, that's exactly why I asked the question. The very
right,
first time I
if
saw
you
a washing process, I felt like it was a process, and it was
and
something that I
no,
had to commit to memory, and it was very confusing, and it was very fast.
no, no,
So I was
no,
like,
that's
is this
it.
ghusl? Or just can we just bathe this person and it's
That's
over?
it.
So
That's the object. That's the object. To flip it to the right, then flip it to the left, then do this, then do that. All of that is just to help you furthermore. But if you get to the object, just wash the body. Boom. That's all I want from you. Wash the body. Just make sure you don't look at the aura. Cover the aura, please. That's it. You did what is necessary. That's all I want from you. That's it. Can you just wash the body? Yes, you can. That's it. Okay. That's the whole object. And all the other details, like I said, if you don't follow all that process, it's a sunnah. Or it's also, let's call them washing tips to make it easier for you. That's it. Okay. Okay. So for washing and shrouding, Certainly the person has to know the fiqh of it, because they will encounter some things which they would definitely want to ask questions about, even though, yeah, I simplified it and said, hey, just wash the body and that's the whole object and you're done. So yes, but there will be some questions that will pop up, and it's kind of like a hands-on. When your hands-on is completely different than just giving me, like you just said, just wash it, and now this body is leaking. Now they actually have a wound. What am I going to do with that? What's going to happen now that I washed it and now it's leaking? What should I do? Should I wait for it to dry? Should I not wait for it to dry? What? So that's why we get into these basically details, because when you're hands-on, all those other questions will be like, what am I supposed to do now? It's kind of when you're hands-on in something, you didn't expect something to happen. So we would prepare you by giving all that fiqh to make the story basically easier for you and answer all those questions. Okay. Who's the person that's going to be washing? Here's one thing, is that sometimes some people might actually make a will, and they would say, I want X or Y because I trust X or Y to wash me. I don't want anybody else coming in. And some people would actually want to volunteer and come in, and we would have certain people. Some people want to volunteer because they want to share a spiritual moment. Other people want to just come in just to watch and just to find something to talk about. Other people, and that's where it becomes that, no, we don't want people just coming in and just observing that. No, they definitely don't want to do that. And that's why the one that would be considered as the priority to come in for washing is basically if there is a specific person that was assigned by the dead person. So this dead person made a will, I want my daughter to wash me and shroud me. Okay. Or I want my nephew, or, of course, we're talking about within the halal limits. Okay. Let's say if it's a male, we're going to have a male do it. If it's a female, then we're going to have a female do it, unless we're going to talk about the spouses in just a bit. Okay. So if that person is adl, is basically, what is it? Adl is basically a person with integrity, a person that we can trust. And in that situation, that's the person that is going to be washing that. And that's Abu Bakr as-Siddiq had made the will that his own wife, Asma bint Umays, would be the person to wash him and shroud him. So therefore, for a woman to wash and shroud her husband, that is actually permissible. And for the man as well to wash and shroud his wife, that would also be permissible. Okay. Anas ibn Malik had actually made a will that Muhammad ibn Sirin would be the one to wash him and shroud him. So you could see, okay, that this is something that was actually done in terms of putting in a will of who you want to wash you, or who to you your preference is. Okay. And certainly if this person didn't make a will, then in that situation, we would put forward the father for that deceased person. And if we're talking about a son that is deceased. Okay. Why? Because the father is basically an affectionate person, a person that would care for their son. So they want to present them in the best way, and certainly basically give the best care. And then certainly we're going to look at, if the father is not there, then the grandfather. If the grandfather is not capable of doing it, then in that situation, we would consider basically the paternal relatives. So we would look at the uncles are not there, then the cousins, the first cousins are not there, then the second cousins, etc. Usually from the father's side. And also is from the father's side, not the mother's side. Okay. And then if those are not present, then certainly a person that is probably not even a relative. So usually in Muslim funeral homes, we would actually have someone that is trained and basically assigned to do that job. Okay, trained and assigned to do that job, that's all right. You don't have to be present when this happens. Okay. And yeah, some people would like to basically be present and assist probably in during that moment. That's absolutely fine, but to a number that is necessary. So we're not going to come in just to have people just come in and feel that they are next to this person. No, this isn't a sightseeing. We'll have you give your farewell goodbyes. Once we finish the washing and shrouding, we would like you to basically limit the number of people that are present for the washing and shrouding to what is necessary, not what is special. Okay, what is special? This is not a moment to somehow think that it's special for me to be there and basically just really do nothing. Okay. What is most special at that moment is to preserve the dignity and privacy for the deceased. That's the most special thing in doing right now, and not how you would like to be present. We would like to give honor to the dead person. Okay, so if we're talking about all of them basically knowing how to wash and shroud, then in that situation, we would put in the person to lead the washing and shrouding, the one that is most knowledgeable, and the one with the best fiqh. And for a woman, the woman basically is washed by a woman. And certainly, if the woman has a certain will that she wanted someone specific to do the washing and shrouding, then in that situation, it would be that specific woman. And then, of course, we would consider the same idea, the most or the closest relative, and then, of course, the farther and the farther till we basically have someone else that's probably not even a relative do the job. And certainly, a man does not wash and shroud the woman. Okay. A man does not wash and shroud a woman unless basically this washing and shrouding is done by the husband to the wife and the wife to the husband. Okay, so we looked at that one, mentioned that one. In fact, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, like I said, had made the will that his wife Asam Umais would actually shroud him. Ali ibn Abi Talib had washed Fatima. All right, and there's a common thought that people would think that they would lose their wudu if they would wash them, but that's not actually accurate. Okay. What if we're speaking about somebody that is younger than 7 years old? Okay, if it's younger than 7 years old, a man or a woman can actually wash and shroud that young child, and it doesn't, because they would basically have no awra. They wouldn't have awra, so anybody can actually wash them and shroud them. And the one that had actually washed and shrouded Ibrahim, the Prophet's son, was actually the women. The women were the ones that actually washed them. Okay. And a woman, if we're speaking about a boy that is 7 years old and older, okay, then in that situation, the man could not wash a girl that is 7 years and older. For the Malikis, I really find a lot of fiqh in this one. Okay. For the Malikis, they regarded that it would be haram for a man to even change the diaper of a young baby girl, even changing the diaper. And they regarded that it is not permissible for a man to change a young girl's diapers or even touch the awra of a young girl because of fitna or and I will tell you, the many cases of child molestation, most of it actually had come from men and not from women. And I would say, when we do have fitna, where did the Malikis actually come with this fatwa from? They basically used sadd al-dhara'a. Sadd al-Dhara'a basically means closing the means of evil. So in a society where child molestation and certainly exposing children in sexual ways had become very, very common, then in that situation, it's important to recognize fitna and certainly recognize the different ways of protecting young children. Yes, even from their own maharim. This is extremely important to basically practice, even if the person is deceased in a society that had right now made pedophilia as becoming, becoming something that the LGBT is now marketing as something that some might have, they'll call it the orientation for, then in that situation, we're really coming into a society that really is very scary and where children are not protected. So just keep that in mind, that in situations where certainly people's dhimam, people's integrity had become less and less, then in that situation, saddan lidhara'i, as closing the means of evil and certainly preserving the spirituality of people, then in that situation, we have to take that in consideration. And certainly, why do the men are, okay, she says, why are men more predator, basically perpetrators? That's not for me to get into the science behind that. Why is that necessarily the case? How do men relate to sexuality and how do men relate to that in comparison with women? There's a whole science behind that. So I'm not going to get into that, but you can actually watch some of those neurologists and those specialists in neuroscience that actually tell you how men's brain structure is completely different than female brain structure in relationship to sexuality, now they say it. So I'm not going to get into that wagon, okay? And certainly it is not permissible that a Muslim would wash and shroud a disbeliever or even carry their janazah or even carry their casket or even shroud the disbeliever. And it is not permissible that a person would pray for or even follow the funeral of a kafir person. Just keep this one in mind. This is a very common question that I would get. Let's say a person that is deceased is not Muslim, and the funeral was in a church, okay, or in a funeral home or a church, and they were doing those prayers. Okay, when they're doing the prayer, don't be present for the prayer. When they basically give the farewell, let's say they're standing there, probably giving a farewell, or in that way, then in that situation, you can be present to show your support, but not carry the casket, not wash and shroud, and not walk in honor, in that honor for that kafir. Let's see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la tatawallaw qawman ghadiba Allahu alayhim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, let's see how they translate it. Oh, you who believe, do not make allies of the people with whom Allah has become angry. Okay. So how's that making allies? Is this political alliance, or is this, so this is basically telling us that, there are certain things that they would have within their area of practice, their area of culture, their area of religion, that you as a Muslim, you have your area in your territory of practice, territory of religion, territory of culture, let's say it that way, and therefore your practice should not go beyond basically including yourself in someone else's practice, religious practices, cultural practices, etc. But you would have to preserve your own identity. That's what creating certain alliances basically is talking about. An alliance is not exclusive to political alliance, but it could also be cultural. It could also be religious as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting you know your identity is basically to be preserved and not be confused in where you are at within this whole spectrum of practices, this whole spectrum of rituals or whatever it is. Okay, let's see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تُصَلِّ عَلَىٰ أَحَدٍ مِّنْهُمْ مَاتَ أَبَدًا وَلَا تَقُمْ عَلَىٰ قَبْرِهِ إِنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ. Literally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and do not pray, that is, O Muhammad sallallahu on the funeral over any of them who had died ever, or stand at his grave. Indeed, they disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a pretty straightforward one. Do not pray on them. Do not stand on their grave, meaning to give that respect over their grave. And innahum kafaru billah. Yet, I would like to note that some scholars had considered that that was exclusive to the Prophet, at least not the prayer, but standing on the grave. Okay, so what do you say? I can stand on their grave. So the sunnah is when you pass by the grave of believers, is to say, Assalamu alaikum dara qawmin mu'mineen, antum mustabiqun, wa nahnu inshallah bikum lahiqun. اللهم اغفر لنا ولهم وارحمنا وارحمهم ولا تحرمنا أجرهم ولا تفتنا بعدهم. Okay, that was too long. Let's write it down. Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. Let's say دعاء, and we're going to say السلام عليكم دار قوم مؤمنين. Here we go. We're going to get that out. Okay, let's see. And this is what we're going to do. Okay, this is basically what we're going to be saying. Let's see. The Prophet ﷺ had said, خرج إلى مقبرة فقال السلام عليكم دار قوم المؤمنين وإنا إن شاء الله بكم لاحقون. Let's see another one. Okay. Let's see right there. Okay. السلام عليكم دار قوم المؤمنين مؤمنين أنتم السابقون ونحن إن شاء الله بكم لاحقون. Here we go. This is another dua right there. Let's see if I can also. Here we go. This is one. Assalamu alaikum أهل الديار من المؤمنين. Or you can say Assalamu alaikum دار قوم المؤمنين. إنا إن شاء الله بكم لاحقون أسأل الله لنا ولكم العافية. Okay. العافية is basically protection. Protection from hellfire, that is. Okay. Let's see. وإنا إن شاء الله بكم لاحقون right there. اللهم اغفر لنا ولهم وارحمنا وارحمهم ولا تحرمنا أجرهم. You can make the different du'as right there. Okay, let's see. Now going back to what we were doing. Okay, so the ayah says ما كان للنبي والذين آمنوا أن يستغفروا للمشركين. That it is not befit for the prophet or the believers to ask forgiveness for the mushrikeen, polytheists. So what does that mean? To ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their forgiveness, well, it would not be fit. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordained and decreed that there is no forgiveness for shirk. Can I make dua for them in regards to dunya? Yes, you can. Let's say a friend of yours is not a believer. She's basically a Christian or Jew or whatever religion. Okay. But you made the dua for her that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would heal her from cancer. Okay. Is that permissible? Yes. You can make a dua for it that is related to their dunya, but not to the akhirah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unless you want to make a dua for her hidayah, well, that's a different story. But for her forgiveness, for may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give her rahmah, Allah yarhamha, the answer is no, you can't do that. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already decreed, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. that the Lord Almighty does not forgive that anybody would associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But can I make dua for her dunya? Maybe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give her, I guess, a good job, or maybe give her a healthy body, or maybe make her live happily ever after, give her a pious husband, or whatever it is. Then in that situation, yes, you can. For her dunya, you can make a dua for her dunya, but not for her forgiveness in the akhirah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had already decreed that we could never make istighfar for al-mushrikeen, just like in this ayah. All right. So can we bury the disbelievers? Only if there was no one else to bury them from the disbelievers. So if there was no one to bury this person, well, certainly we're just not going to leave them stay out there, because they will definitely harm those that are around. The odor itself, just the process of a decaying body right there. Then in that situation, basically just bury the person to avoid the harm and what might happen to the people that are present and probably near that. Same thing if we're talking about a person that left the religion of Islam. Now here he said, كَتَارِكِ الصَّلَاةِ عَمْدًا, such as a person that does not pray and on purpose. Okay, there are different opinions between scholars on a person that is not praying, whether they're considered kafir or not. I'll just make the story short as say differences of opinions between scholars on a person that is not praying. Same thing, differences of opinions on a person that committed suicide. Can we pray Salat al-Janazah on a person that committed suicide or not? The differences of opinions between scholars on that is basically based on, is that first of all a sin or kufr? It's a sin, not kufr. So what does that mean anyways? If we say that this is a sin and not kufr, that would simply mean that the person is considered a Muslim. If we are to say this is kufr, then we are saying that this person is not Muslim. Therefore, they cannot be buried in Muslim graveyards or cemeteries. But majority of the scholars had considered that that is a sin and not kufr. In fact, all scholars had considered that that's a sin, not kufr. Okay, but we had read in some books of fiqh that the imam should not pray Salat al-Janazah on that person. Why? Number one is that suicide in itself, there's no doubt that it's haram. Okay? Yet, the scholars that said that we should not be praying, or the imam, sorry, not we, okay, but the imam should not be praying Salat al-Janazah on a person that committed suicide. They considered that that is in order to discourage people from that act. And that this was not something that the imam honored them by their presence. But should the other people pray Salat al-Janazah? It's definitely a communal obligation. But should the imam be praying? Some scholars considered that no, he shouldn't be praying. Other scholars, they said, well, that's a personal preference. They can see the society and whether that matters or not. If it does, then certainly we would discourage them from praying Salat al-Janazah just to deter others from this practice. Other scholars, they said it doesn't matter really, because the person himself is already deceased. So it's not going to deter the person from doing it, but possibly maybe deter others. But are people really going to care? Depends on the situation. Okay. The innovator, when he said صاحب البدعة المكفرة, there's a bid'ah mukaffira and a bid'ah غير mukaffira. Yes, I'm just going to make the story short, a bid'ah mukaffira, such as a bid'ah that is getting the person out of the fold of Islam, but they're still saying that they're Muslim. Okay, then that's a different thing. It's a completely different thing in Aqidah. Okay, so Muslim, whether a person is alive or a dead person, in regards to the kafir, a Muslim is supposed to have a clear and a correct stance. You don't water down the religion in order to appear inclusive and accepting. Islam is your border. That's what you want to make sure, that you recognize that border and not confuse your borders and your territory. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had also mentioned about Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. When Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِذْ قَالُوا لِقَوْمِهِمْ إِنَّا بُرَآءُ مِنْكُمْ وَمِمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ كَفَرْنَا بِكُمْ وَبَدَا بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمُ الْعَدَاوَةُ وَالْبَغْضَاءُ أَبَدًا حَتَّى تُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَحْدَهُ. And when they said to their people, indeed, we are disassociated from you and from whatever you worship other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have denied you, and there had been appeared between us and you an animosity and hatred forever until you believe in Allah alone. When did that happen? Well, that happened when they had, one, they recognized the truth, but they refused to embrace it. Two, they recognized the truth, but they had chosen to basically attack the believers. And that's when Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam decided that it's time for us to leave. It's time for us to not only disassociate ourselves from them, but to make it a clear distinction that, you know what, since you had chosen your stance, you know what the truth is, but you had taken the stance to attack the religion, attack the truth, and basically attack us, then in that situation, yes, definitely, we're on one side and you're on the other end, and we basically had chosen to consider our borders and that we are not in a relationship, and therefore choosing to take a clear stance that we are not a part of you. So this is not to be inclusive, but this is to say, yes, we are basically boycotting your shirk. We are boycotting your culture. We are basically disassociating ourselves from this act, disassociating ourselves, and just taking a serious stance and simply letting you know that we are not part of all of this shirk. Okay, let's see. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تجد قوما يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر يوادون من حاد الله ورسوله ولو كانوا آباءهم أو أبناءهم أو إخوانهم أو عشيرتهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, you will not find a people who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala last day having affection for those who oppose Allah and His Messenger, even if they were their fathers, their sons, or their brothers, or their kindred. So what does that mean? That a believer was basically determined, even if it's a relative, even if it's a biological or a blood relations, at the end there are certain priorities that we would have to take as basically our place of alliance. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And certainly my relationship with the mu'mineen comes even stronger and the real bond than with those that are disbelievers, even if they were close relatives. Okay, let's see. And of course, now starting with the washing, of course, the water has to be permissible to use. In other words, you didn't steal the water, and certainly does not contain any najasa. Okay, it's best if the water is cold. Not too cold though, unless there was a need to use a little bit of warm water to remove some dirt or something that is dirty perhaps, or probably if it was too cold, then in that situation you could make it a little warm. Okay, certainly you want to wash and shroud in an area that is closed, a place that's probably, you know, not open to the public. All right, whether it's a chamber or maybe maybe a tent or somewhere that is basically a closed area. And certainly we're going to be covering the dead person from the belly button to the knee before even starting to wash and shroud. And we're going to remove all the clothes on this dead person, but you're going to be making sure that you're not removing the clothes and basically leaving the dead person bare at any time. So even when, let's say, they're wearing, let's say, trousers or anything of that sort, you want to cover their aura, and you never want to uncover it whatsoever. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ had forbid looking at the aura, looking at the private part of a dead or a living person, whether it's virtual, whether it's through camera, or whether it's live, or whatever, or whether in person, whether it's a kafir, whether it's a disbeliever, a believer, a child, and one, never look at someone's aura. Okay, and certainly you want to a little bit, of course, just open up the legs a little bit in order to let the water basically go and pass. And certainly because there's going to be a point where we're going to be kind of giving a small pressure basically on the abdomen, and that's going to release a lot of the different things that are in the intestines. Okay, and the person can have an assistant to basically help them wash that person, but we're not going to have too many people. And certainly while washing, we're going to be basically having while washing, I'm going to be basically having something underneath the head, just kind of lift it just a little bit. You know what I like about the funeral homes, at least the funeral homes that I had seen, at least the non-Muslim funeral homes, is that they will have things that lift the body up. So what does that look like? They would have something underneath the head. Maybe I could show it to you. Okay. Something underneath the head, kind of, it would have something that you could put underneath the neck, and then underneath the hips, and then underneath the legs, and certainly the body. Remember, it's going to be anyways hardened already, but that would lift it up from the water. And even the actual it looks like a bed, but it's a sink that looks like a bed, and it would be tilted. That way the water can go inside the, not completely tilted, we're talking about maybe 15-20 degree angle. Okay, it would be tilted, and then the body would be slightly tilted, but the actual bedding basically has these not holes, but they're like straps, or not straps, but yeah, they would basically be in bars, and these bars would let the water go inside, and then of course that would collect the water, sorry, in basically in the sewer right there, so it'd be easier to dry faster and let the water basically go through. Okay, let's see. And of course, at one point, we're going to have the body basically, if we're capable of lifting the body up a little bit, kind of like tilting it like a sitting position, if we're capable of doing that, then we would do that. And then gently press on the abdomen, and that's going to release all the different things in the abdomen and the intestines. And certainly just be prepared. Some things are going to come out basically from the anus, and certainly, it's like you're expecting, of course, whatever was stuck in the belly, now it's going to come out. And then in that situation, you got to be prepared to basically pour all the water, and you're going to have very long gloves. Those gloves are going to be really long. You're going to definitely have the plastic type of aprons to basically just make sure you cover yourself and all of that. Now, here's one thing. To protect yourself, this is the first thing. You want to make sure that you yourself, it's maybe a good idea to basically have a mask on your face. long gloves, and definitely, you can have special kind of shoes, or special kind of boots, and special kind of like an apron just to protect your clothes, because you don't want to end up having things go on your clothes. I want you to always also stay safe. It doesn't make sense. You never know what might come out of that body. You never know, whether from blood or whether from different illnesses, or probably just, things that are coming out of the body. All of these things, you don't want it to go on your clothes. You don't want it to go on your body. And you just definitely need to make yourself first safe. Okay, let's see. So the first thing that we're going to do in terms of the process, we're going to be cleaning, just like you go to the bathroom first. What do you do before you take a shower? You go to the bathroom first. Okay, and certainly you're going to be washing the private part. But again, you're not going to be touching the private part. The private part is going to be covered all the time. Okay, but you're going to, from underneath this let's say towel that you put over the private part, you're going to be wearing the glove, and you're then going to be washing the private part. Okay. Certainly you're going to have the niyyah, and you're going to be basically making, after, of course, cleaning the private part, you're going to be then making wudu. Going to be making wudu just like you would do for salah. But instead of washing the mouth, you're not going to wash the mouth, because if you wash the mouth, the water's just going to go inside the mouth, because you're going to think of this body right now as really an empty space. If you put water inside the mouth, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have some stuff basically start coming out from the bottom. So you don't want to put water through the nostrils, and neither do you want to put water inside the mouth. But what you're going to do, you're going to wipe the mouth, and you're going to basically gently, you're going to wash the nose, but you don't want to insert a lot of water. Okay, so it's enough to just wipe over the teeth and wipe over the nose, and with basically wet. Of course, you're wearing the gloves all the time. You never use your bare hands. If you don't have any gloves, to use possibly some kind of rag that is wet, you could do that as well. Okay, you never want to put in water inside the nostrils, or even the mouth. Okay, and then of course you're going to be washing the right side. Okay, now here goes the actual washing. Well, anyways, when you make your own showering, you wash the right side first, and then you wash the left side. So whether we're speaking about right side starting from the head, right side from the hands, right side from the shoulders, right side from probably, since anyways you're going to be right now washing the right side, think of washing the whole right side. Okay, then you're going to be, here we go, we're going down and basically washing all the right side, and then you're going to be flipping them, and now you're going to be washing the left side. Okay, you're going to see that. And certainly using isidr, which is basically, remember that stuff that we talked about earlier, the soapy stuff. Okay, where is it? Where was it? Oh dear, where was it? Well, you know what I'm talking about, the soapy stuff that we talked about. Where was it? Dear. You know what I'm talking about. Let's see, the images right there. Okay, remember this one? Yeah, we talked about it earlier. So that's what you're going to be using. Yeah, this one. Okay, you're going to be using that one, and to wash with, like I said, you could use soap as well. If one washing is enough, then and it was clean, that's basically fine. If you needed to do it 3 times, that's absolutely fine. The whole object is to basically cleanse the body, and you can even go up to 7 times if needed. Okay, what if I needed to do further times? You can, but I don't know those situations that might actually need further times. You just the whole thing is to basically cleanse the body. Okay, but it may be possible that maybe an accident happened, or things like that, and you needed to wash more. But I would worry with too much washing that the body might start to tear. If the body starts to tear, then we're going to say, stop right there. I don't want you tearing the body. Okay, the final wash is going to be using the camphor, which is basically what we talked about, this stuff. Okay, can we use the synthetic camphor? You certainly can. You certainly can use that. It's a sunnah anyways. And what camphor is going to do is going to harden the body a little bit, and it's basically going to give it a sense, and also as an insect repellent. Okay, and that would be the last thing that you would want to do. It's an insect repellent. You want to keep it on the body. You don't want to wash it off once you use the camphor. Okay, then you're going to be drying the deceased. Basically, you're going to be, if there are any mustache, if it's a man, you're basically going to trim it. You don't have to, but you can trim it. Trimming the fingernails. If they're wearing synthetic nails, I'm afraid if you're capable of using, what do they call that stuff? The nail polish remover, you could use it. But if that nail polish remover, or even those synthetic nails, if you're starting and you needed to remove them, and those synthetic nails are starting to come off, but the part of the fingers are starting to come off, we're going to say stop right there. We don't want to harm the body, so she'll be held accountable for those synthetic nails. If I don't know if she was putting it on while she was not praying, or whether she was praying but didn't care about it, that's a different story. But if it's going to be harming the actual tissue in that body, then we're going to say just leave it there. We don't want to harm the body. Okay. You can remove things like underarm hair, all of that, maybe shave it, but you don't necessarily have to. I've had questions of people telling me, well, what about trimming the pubic hair? I said, no, you cannot trim the pubic hair, because it's not permissible to look at the pubic hair and look at that area. Anyways, it's supposed to be covered. Certainly you can braid the hair. And for a woman, you can braid it into 3. You can braid it even more if you want, and certainly would be taken to the back. And if there was not enough water to wash the dead, then in that situation, or if we feared that washing the dead might actually start letting that tissue come out in the body, and now it's starting to probably decompose, and right now it's starting to come out, then in that situation we would just say, just do tayammum for it, and that's it. Okay, and same thing if we had, let's say, one woman and there were a group of men and none of them were her husband. Okay, then in that situation we would just say, well, if there's no water, then you would basically, or if there's no, let's say, permissible person to do the washing, then in that situation we would say just do tayammum. By what tayammum is basically striking on the soil and then wiping the face once, and then wiping the hands. And certainly you would use it using some kind of a glove. If one area we're capable of washing, but the rest we weren't capable of washing it, then in that situation we could do tayammum for the rest. Okay, now what we're going to do, the shrouding. Let's look into the shrouding really quick, because we're going to be watching a video. Inshallah, it's going to be really easy. Okay, so after basically completely washing, and we're going to allow that to dry. Going to give it some time to dry. You can use a fan to give it some time to dry, or you can probably dry it with a towel. That's absolutely fine, but you want it to completely dry, okay, before you start doing the shrouding. The shrouding is supposed to be, we're going to be looking at the measurement for the body. You don't want it to be too long, okay? Don't want it to be too short either, okay? And it's best if it is white. It does not have to be white. It doesn't have to be white, but it cannot be something that is sewn. But wait up. It doesn't mean that it can't be sewn. We're not talking about the ends here. We're not talking about the edges, but we're actually talking about something like sewn into a t-shirt and pants and probably that. No, you don't want something that sewn. But if we're talking about the ends being sewn, that's absolutely fine. Okay, the amount of shroud that you need is basically to cover all the body. For the men, with 3 shrouds. Okay, for the women, it would be with 5 different shrouds. What does that mean? 5 different shrouds? We're talking about for the woman, 1 is covering the bottom part, basically from the belly button to basically the knee, or yeah, the knee, or even all the way down to the feet. And we've got a khimar, which basically is going to be like a hijab, and we're going to have a qamis. What is that looking like? Think of a abaya, but with no sleeves. Okay. Think of a abaya, but with no sleeves, and it's not sewn on the sides. So that's what it's going to look like. Okay. So it basically would have, maybe I can draw it for you. Well, you're going to see it anyway. So, okay. Can draw it for you. So this would be looking like this. Okay. Opening it up, we're going to open it up like this. Okay. And then there would be a circle in the middle, and that would be the back part, because we're going to put that head inside right here. And then this would be the front part. So this would now be like like we're wearing a shirt, but now this is going to be the front part, and this is going to be the back part, and the head is going to get squeezed in here. Okay, we're going to talk about this, and inshallah, I'm going to let you say it into a movie if you don't understand what I'm saying. Okay, and for the child, 1 shroud is enough, and you could also use 3 as well. Okay, let's get into more of this. And certainly, the sunnah is to do tajmir bil bakhur. What is it, tajmir? Tajmir could mean that you're using any sort of perfume. It can be synthetic perfume. It can be just different kinds of probably incense, or some people, depending on the country, some people put tea bags, some people might actually put sage, flowers, dry flowers, something that just gives a nice odor. Okay. And it doesn't have to be anything specific. Okay. Same thing for, unless this person is in a state of Hajj and Ihram, then we're not going to use any of that. Okay. For the men, of course, you would basically have all the different 3 shrouds basically on top of one another, and certainly all the time they're going to be covered. Okay, they're going to be covered, meaning from the belly button to that. Okay, al-hanut is basically put on the shroud, and do you have to put cotton in between the 2 buttocks? The answer is you do not have to. Okay, you do not actually have to do that. So it's kind of like making, you've got like an X right there. Okay. And then in the middle, in this X, you're probably putting cotton balls, and probably putting maybe some incense or some perfumed incense, something like that. And then this will later become, think of it as their underwear. So then we would basically tuck it underneath their buttocks, and then we would tie this one with this one and this one with this one in order to make it an underwear, really. But this underwear is not an underwear for modesty, but that's basically because when the dead person is going to be moved, and of course we're going to be burying them, etc., and some things might still come out of their private part. So this is going to be basically the cotton balls, or the cotton that's basically taking in basically absorbing anything that comes out of the private parts. Okay. Okay, so of course the areas that we're going to be putting the perfumed, whether we're speaking about, do we have to stick cotton balls in their nose? The answer is no, unless something's continuously coming out. Do we have to stick cotton in their mouth? The answer is no, you don't have to, unless something is coming out. Okay, are we going to be closing the nose, the ears? Do we have to put cotton balls? No, the answer is no, you don't have to, but you can put certain things that are to give a nice smell, basically, in the areas of sujood. So whether we're speaking about the forehead, the nose, the hands, we're talking about the hands where they would make sujood, and certainly the knees, and certainly the area where we would sit down, and basically the toes, but from the other side. Okay, same thing if we're talking about the different areas that are usually tucked, like underneath the shoulders, underneath the basically the joint area, okay, or even the belly button, and certainly just those areas to kind of get a nice smell for those areas. But do you necessarily have to? This is all a sunnah, okay? And once we're shrouding this person, then there's going to be a remaining amount of shroud, then that's what you're going to be tying, okay? That extra piece, you're going to be tying it. And certainly for the woman, basically something similar to that. Okay, I'm gonna basically first, before, I was hoping, let's see, what do we got? We've got here the prayer. Okay, yeah, we'll stop right here, inshallah. But I want you to watch the movie first before we stop. I was hoping that we could finish today, but that's all right. Yeah, let's see. I'm gonna be watching the movie. So here we go. Let's do that. Okay, here we go. Okay, I like that they actually used a dummy here and not an actual person. So here we go. This is basically right there. Look at how, of course, covering the person always, they used a dummy here. So kind of, gently pressing on the stomach right there. Maybe you can get this, make it a little bigger. Maybe right there. You could see, what are they doing? Well, you could use a glove, or you could use something that you're covering your hand with. You're never going to uncover. Of course, they're using a dummy, so they're not really careful about all of that, but they're just giving you a demonstration right here to basically gently, of course, you could use a glove, like those really thick gloves. And certainly you're going to let the water basically go out and remove right there. One thing is that in the Muslim countries, I don't understand why, they're still using buckets, but you could actually, maybe because they have the sidr right here. I mean, that's absolutely fine. But in the funeral homes in the US, they actually have a hose, and they're washing it with that. But then the sidr water, because of course they don't have a sidr fountain, right? The sidr water would be in the bucket because you need to get the foam out. So that's a different story. You don't have to use like a pitcher to get the water out. You could just use basically a hose, and that would probably be easier. Of course, the first thing that you're going to do is, of course, do istinja, and definitely you're not going to insert water in the nose and the nostrils or the mouth, because that's basically going to, notice how he covered the mouth and washed the face, because you didn't want to have the water there. And of course, after making wudu, now we're still making the wudu right there, just exactly if the person was alive. And of course, we're going to consider their right, not your right. Okay, to be washing basically like as if the person is making wudu. And certainly here it is, wiping the head, making that complete wudu. And this is just a few minutes, and then we're done, inshallah. We're going to do that playback speed. Of course, here we go, washing the feet really quick. Of course, once we do all of that washing, they're going to be doing the whole washing on all over the face. Now we're doing the washing on the right side. Of course, every single time you do the washing on the right side, you want to make sure you're not inserting the water inside the mouth and the nostrils, but wiping those areas. Now we're washing the right side. And since we're washing the right side, of course, we're going to make sure that you're letting water enter also the private area. So you could also pour the water over. Now, since we washed the right side, now we're going to wash the right side from the back. And of course, we're not going to be looking at the person's private part, but we're washing the right side first, and then we're turning the person over to the other side. And now we're going to be washing the left side. Okay. And of course, the front left side first, and then certainly washing now the back left side. Okay. Here we go. Now we're flipping the body. Notice how in order to easier flip the body, you're going to basically hold the hand in order to flip the body. The easiest way, I know, one thing is that because this is a dummy, it was easier for them to flip, but it's actually going to be harder if it's an actual person. So in order to flip the person, you're going to bend, if possible, you're going to bend the knee. You're going to bend the leg, the left leg, in order to flip the person and kind of make it easier for you. But sometimes it won't bend. So that's when you need that assistance to help you basically flip that body. But the whole object is basically to wash it. So now we wash the left side front, then the left side back. Okay. And certainly now they're going to be getting the sidr. And of course, the sidr is going to be making that soapy water, and you're going to make of course, let's make them go faster right there. Here we go. Basically the sidr right there is going to be soap. You're going to let the water, that body dry first. Okay. Well, first we're going to use the sidr, but the sidr soapy water and the amount of sidr that you're going to be using is really dependent on what the amount necessary. And I don't mean by necessary meaning obligatory, but I mean the amount needed to wash. Okay. So then, of course, here we go. Basically getting us the needed after certainly the body being washed. We're going to be putting the kafur as well in the same way. So if you were to put the kafur in the same way, after letting the body basically get washed with the sidr, and then finally the kafur, just going to pour it really over the body, but not inside the nose. And now that the body was washed, now they're going to transport the body basically to an area to prepare it for the shroud. Now, while they're carrying it for the shroud, of course, because this area, now here's the thing. In the Muslim funeral homes, sometimes, because they don't have, I would say, the tools, sometimes, not all Muslim funeral homes, okay? But I don't know why, really. They could easily get those kind of things that you would see at the other funeral homes. That would make things a lot easier in needing less space. But I don't know why they're sometimes primitive in the way. I think it's important to actually see how the non-Muslim funeral homes, how they have a certain easier way to carry, and those types of sinks and all of that makes it a lot easier than and needing less body power to actually use those. But yeah, whatever. And of course, now they're going to need to transport, but you don't really need to transport in the other places. If we can have that dead body basically get washed and shrouded in the same space, well, that's fair. That's okay. But if you needed to transport it to another area for washing, for the shroud, then that's absolutely fine as well. But if you could just let it dry in its space, so that would be a lot easier. Let me show you, for example, here, they have the gloves ready. Well, we would have bigger gloves, really. And of course, we're not going to need those, but we might actually need this one. This is the needle in situations where you might have an autopsy done, you might actually need a needle. This is the kind of needle. It's not the kind of needle that you would sew fabric. This is the kind of needle that you would use and you would use these scissors in order to sew the body. It's not like the way you would sew fabric. You would use this needle to sew the body that probably went through autopsy. And then to get the needle out, you're not going to get the needle out using your fingers, but you're going to use this scissor because it's going to be too hard for you to use. Okay. And certainly, I wish, there we go. This is what I wanted you to see. Where'd it go? Oh dear. Okay, here we go. Oh dear. That was too fast, I guess. Hold on. Let me show you that. What I was telling you about this thing that they would put under the head. Let's see if I can get it to you. Let me see. They're going to use these things. As Muslims, we don't use these things because those are too empty. Oh, okay, this is what I'm talking about. Lifting the head in order for you to be able to deal with it. And they would even have something right in the middle as well. Okay, they're using a dummy right here, but you would also have something. And look at this one. See, there are two kinds of these tables. There are kinds that are, flat like that. And there's another kind that would actually have bars. Okay, so this is another kind. And at the end right here, there would be like a small, what do they call that? Like a sewer type of thing. We as Muslims don't use any of these because, we're not going to use any of these very harsh chemicals, all of that. That's against the religion to use. But they would use these, of course, to empty the body and do what is called embalmment. But as Muslims, we don't use any of that stuff. That's, to us, that's basically harming the body, which is against the religion. Okay. We don't use any of that. So we're going to skip all of that stuff. Okay. And yeah, they'll use all that stuff and put them in the casket, all of that, but not as Muslims. That's not how we do things. Okay. So this is it for today. Sorry, I think we only have the shrouding left, right? I tried as much as I can to basically complete everything, but you could say, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. We could still have, let me see how many. That's probably going to take just a little bit, not too much, but at least we would get into, inshallah, into making sure that those questions that you might be asking are answered. That's what I care about. Okay, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. I've got sisters right there. If you would like to unmute yourselves, that's okay. If you would like to, put it in the chat, that's okay too. Okay, what I'm going to do